Hello and welcome to Scribes and Songsters. I'm Veronique Mandel. Tonight's first guest not only writes about superheroes, but he's a real-life superhero himself. Mark Sewell dons a mask and walks the streets of downtown Windsor, donating food, water and clothing to people in need. Sewell, known as Canadian Justice, also writes about superheroes and fighting crime. His two books are Brutal Justice, Your Guide to Being a Violent Vigilante, Crime-Fighting Superhero, and Stabman, Diary of a Superhero Psycho. They're filled with action, adventure, darkness, and levity. Mark joins me now in the studio. Welcome.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Well, that's a lot to unpack. But I want to know, first of all, who's Mark Sewell? Where did you grow up and what led you to here?
A lot of my early childhood was more in Calgary, and then...
you're a Western guy.
Well, I was born in Ontario, then out to Calgary. Oil stuff took a downturn, so, family moved to Chatham and then on to Windsor. So I guess childhood was Calgary and Chatham mostly.
How long have you been in Windsor?
Since 2002, so about 18 years now.
Yeah, well, you're a Windsorite.
Oh, yeah. It certainly feels like it now. Yeah, when people ask where you're from, I say Windsor.
So, did you have a superhero thing growing up? Lots of little boys, they want superhero costumes for Halloween and all that.
I always liked comic books to a certain degree, but as a child, it was more space and, like space Lego and such. So there was a lot of imagination involved, creating these other imaginary worlds, which I think helped later on with writing. But, there was always an interest in superheroes naturally, but maybe not to the same extent as later on. When
did you start thinking about the superhero persona?
It was actually while I was writing Stabman. I had, in order to write it, for 2 months, while I was working out 70 hours a week, everything was superheroes. Like, I couldn't watch anything that wasn't superhero, whether it was on TV or movies or books. There was no science fiction. There was nothing. It was all superheroes. And there was this documentary called Superheroes by HBO, and it was about real-life superheroes. And at first, I found it hilarious. There's these adults running around there. They're all dressed up weird. They're like, what, are they going to fight crime or something? But then I started having it in the background, and so I was playing over and over again. Sometimes I'd be up at 3 a.m. writing, and this is on in the background. And with repeated viewings, it stopped being as funny and started being inspirational. Because although at first glance, especially with some of the people in the movie, which you'll recognize if you see it, you could laugh at them, they're actually trying to do something, and especially when it comes to helping out those in need, like the homeless and such. It was like they're taking a different tack to it, but it's not so much about sometimes the superhero persona is about attracting attention to the problem, because if you just see someone helping someone, you might not even see them, but you see, especially if you got a group of people with these weird outfits, you look over, what are those guys doing? Oh, they're actually doing something nice. It's going to inspire someone else to do something. They don't have to dress like some kind of weirdo like us, but, they can go and donate to the downtown mission. We see more people every year just out there handing stuff out themselves. Yeah.
How did you get into... there's a group in Toronto.
Yes.
Were they an inspiration? Are you part of that group?
Crimson Canuck, he was the first person in Windsor to do it. He had on Facebook. The internet has changed a lot of things. I just saw a thing that he was. They're organizing their first group mission to go to Toronto, and so I called my brother after work one day. So I got a question for you. He's like, okay. He's like, do you want to be a superhero? I'm like, what? Do you want to be a superhero? He's like,
did he think you'd lost your mind?
He's like, I guess, sure. So I was like, okay, great. So we're going in September. We're going to do this. And so he's like, oh, okay. And he just, he liked comic books and role-playing games growing up, so it wasn't too hard to sell. Yeah. I had to drag him a little bit, but it wasn't that far.
So I can start to see the genesis of how this all came together. So tell our audience about Stabman.
Okay, well, unlike Batman, there's no Genesis story that the reader's going to come to. It's basically just kind of someone got sick of crime for whatever reason, and they got the mental imbalance to just run out and try to do something about it, and basically start with what they got in their closet, in their drawer. You know, he starts off with like a bus pass, a couple of knives, a stick, and a mask on his face. That's basically the whole thing. And from there, it's just the story progresses organically from wherever the character gets to at that point. Because in order to have the realism, I had to figure out if someone was insane enough to try to do it, what would they be trying to do at that time based on the resources and experience they'd gotten at that point. And so, I mean, like there was at one point 5 different endings that could have happened, but I couldn't figure out how you would cross the border into Mexico without a passport to get plastic surgery. So obviously that wasn't going to work. So, you know, it came with the ending. I mean, I don't want to ruin the ending, but there was definitely some far different ways it could have ended.
Mm-hmm. Now, he starts out, and you think at first he wants to be a good superhero, right, a good vigilante. But he kind of goes off the rails. What makes him go off the rails? Well,
initially, the thing is, like the first going off the rails was not really having a clue what to do. Like any random citizen deciding that they're going to fight crime. And I've talked to people like just like what they thought about, and they're like, oh, I'd go in the alleys and look for crime. For what? I mean, there's not just like, but we have this mind like from all our movies and such that there's
everything happens in the alley.
Yeah, it doesn't. So, but he starts in an alley and then he goes from there. He doesn't really have a clue. Like without the resources of government and such, you're really not going to be able to find real, actual helping society crime. I mean, the character ends up getting into that more once he's got this hacking software, for instance, to find the things. But at first, he's just in an alley trying. So he does the wrong things at first, definitely.
Okay, let's move along to Brutal Justice. Okay. And I have to say, there's so much humor in this book. And so are you a funny person, you know?
I mean, I like to think that at times I could be. My wife has varying opinions on that, depending on the day. I mean, I've always liked to see the humorous side of things. I mean, Douglas Adams is like my favorite author, right? Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Oh, yeah, I love
series.
it.
Right, very funny stuff.
Yes.
And so, I mean, I like to think that I like to laugh at things and see the lighter side of life a lot of times.
And, you know, in a way, that's what sort of, every time you start to think, oh my God, I can't believe this. Right. And then something is so funny.
Yeah.
And there's, you know, that sort of underlying tongue-in-cheek as well about it all. Would you mind reading the prologue to Brutal Justice?
So you decide to take up the vocation of being a ruthless vigilante, taking the law into your own hands, then twisting it into a pretzel and chucking it aside when it gets in the way. Well, I have one thing to say to you. Good idea, man. Go for it.
And you tell them how to go for it.
Yes. Well, the thing is, like the book, that was actually, I was on sick leave from a back injury, and I wanted to read basically the genesis of that was I wanted to read a book that was basically a joke on the same lines as the Zombie Survival Guide. The Zombie Survival Guide is written in a very serious fashion, but it's funny because it's a zombie survival guide.
Yes.
And so that was the idea, is I wanted to read that, and no one had written it. So in order to read it, I had to write it. And so it's the same idea. Like it has to be very, for the most part, quite serious in telling people in factual ways what to do, even though, as it says in the disclaimer, it's a terrible idea.
Yes.
But that's what makes the joke. Now, some people won't necessarily get, but not everyone gets every joke. Not like humor is subjective. Mm-hmm. Which is also why I have the disclaimer, as my dad was wondering, like, well, aren't you kind of insulting your reader? I was like, if they can't take the disclaimer, they should not read this book. They should put it down instantly and never touch it again.
Do you ever fear that someone might take you seriously?
I would say no, in that all the information there is on the internet. And basically, it's like, it was just all, I mean, other than like life experience on certain things, like with martial arts or some other things, everything was like from the internet. It's like, it's all already out there, and it, in multiple places it says that you should not be doing it.
Right. So what kind of response are you getting to it?
I mean, I think that because it was newer, possibly there's less seems to be less reviews. Like the people that have read it seem to like it, but some people found it more disturbing because it was written as a how-to thing, right? It's fiction. It's absolutely 100% fiction, and yet because it's written in that format, some people just it kind of. They liked it, but jarred them more. But I mean, it's written to be entertaining. That's also why in it, it's like I went with also kind of the structure of like a survival guide where you have real life stories, right? Mm-hmm. You use this shelter and you might live. So you have like somebody got lost, they made this shelter, they lived, that sort of thing. It has that in there because this isn't a serious guide. It's not a college textbook. It has to be entertaining. Yeah. And so those things help it to be entertaining so you can sit down and read it because it's not something to do. It's not something to be studying. No one should study it. It's something to just read.
Stabman could certainly be a movie. What are you working on now? Because I got the sense at the end of Stabman that there could be a series.
Well, I mean, I think that would have to be almost something someone else have to write in that. I feel like if I tried to do it again, because for those 2 months I kept in that mindset of the character for a full-time thing, I would have to somehow find a way to do that again. And I fear it could be like when Frank Miller messed up the Batman thing. He did The Dark Knight Returns. It's noted as one of the great all-time graphic novels. Got lots of laurels. Then he came up with The Dark Knight Rises Again, and it's generally derided as one of the worst pieces of trash anyone has put out on the planet.
Know when to stop.
Yes. And so with that one, I felt like I stopped the story when I had told the story I had to have.
Mm-hmm. Where can people buy your books?
Well, they can buy it on Amazon, Indigo, like Indigo Chapters, the iUniverse site itself. But I mean, Amazon is, if you want the Kindle, Amazon.ca or .com will work. If you want the physical version, Amazon.com is a better place to get that.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, you're welcome.
Your books are a lot. Ironically, I think it was a lot of fun to read.
Well, that was the intention, make it fun.
Thank you. Well, on our last episode of Scribes and Songsters, we played the music of Fresh Breath, an alt-country duo from Windsor. This week, we're bringing another of Josh and Katie Pascoe's songs, Likes and Shares. And as the name implies, it's a song about social media. This tune recently remained in the top 20 Canadian online radio charts for 3 consecutive weeks. Quite a feat. Here it is now, Likes and Shares.
It's hard to write it anymore. Seems as though it's all been done before. The chords have all been used, the audience abused. It doesn't matter which station you choose. So I ask of you a favor today. Won't you lend me your ears? Perhaps you'll stay and take a listen to where I think we all went wrong. And maybe I'll have my first hit song. I think we need to shut that book of face. Instantly, Insta is erased. A tweet, your president's rents are gone. And we can finally try to get along. But our population is addicted to the screen. Why don't you take a second to look up at me? Or take a look around and see who's on their phones. Live in the moment before it's gone. Cause you might be listening to the next hit song. But nobody cares. It's all about the likes and the shares. Nobody sees past the edge of their screens. Nobody cares.
Welcome back. I'm Veronique Mandel. Well, our next guest is no stranger to Scribes and Songsters or to the local literary community. Vanessa Shields has written numerous books of poetry and short stories and is an accomplished photographer. She's also an entrepreneur, having opened Gertrude's Writing Room in Walkerville. Named after Gertrude Stein, this is a gathering place where artists can participate in workshops and writing classes. They come to create poetry, make art, and even to play. That's the best part. Vanessa joins us now to talk about what she's been up to since her last visit.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
So, you heard me talking about your writing room. Remind us about all the things that went on there before COVID. We'll talk about post-COVID.
Sure.
But tell us, you had a going concern.
Yes. So we were doing workshops. We were just about to start drop-ins, which was like a shorter version of a workshop. And then we were doing classes, which is once a week for 2 to 3 hours on a certain subject. Those were like the main things. And so every week was filled up. The weekends were busy. We had so many just wonderful collaborations with different artists and people in the community. So yeah, we were actually, that spring session was the busiest that it would have been the busiest had it been able to go through with, several things happening each week and trying out this new thing, this new drop-in thing.
And you also had people coming to do things like do interviews. We took our show out there, and then another writers group did their podcast from there.
Sure, yeah, we were trying to really open up the space for other groups to come in and use it for whatever reason, just because it's such a fun space to be in, and all of those things. The collaborations, like I said, were really starting to bloom nicely. Yeah,
and then COVID. What was that like? The day. Or, when you found out that it was all...
Well, I think I was just afraid in general, of the risk. And I was definitely part of the panic that was going on in general. We were worried about our kids in school. So that was kind of our main thing that we were thinking about and trying to get a handle on and understand what we were supposed to do. My husband's an entrepreneur and his business too had to stop working in the space. So I think we just were blindly going through the emotions, the panic, the fear, the anger, the exhaustion, all of that, like everybody else was.
And what was it like in during those months? Because I know at St. Clair College, we, every month, we would think, let's see what happens next month.
Yeah.
Let's see what happens next month.
Yeah, I think in the beginning there was a hope that at some point in the near future, like maybe a month away, things would change and go back to whatever we want to call normal. I don't think we're ever going to go back to that kind of normal. It's going to be a new one. But I think once we accepted the fact that this is not going away quickly, then I anyway started to think about, okay, well, what does this mean for my business? What does this mean for my own career? What does this mean for my children, my husband, and everything like that? But I'm going to say, I was maybe in June into the summer when I was finally able to let myself understand the severity of the length of this. And then it was summer and it was warm, which I'm so glad that we had the summer so we could go outside and be outside and had the heat to help us. But yeah, I had to rethink my whole business and think about what it meant to me, what I was willing to do. And be faced with what others were already doing with their businesses. A lot of people were very quick to shift to doing things virtually.
Did you think about that?
Absolutely. I still think about it every day. But
what makes you hesitant? So the whole point of Gertrude's Writing Room is to get together in a small, intimate space and create and do our art and talk about writing. And for me, the physicality of that, it's one of the main reasons why I opened that space. I love being able to hold somebody's hand or offer a box of Kleenex or share a plate of cookies. This sort of deep, intimate connections that you make physically, I haven't felt yet in a virtual setting. And how important is that to the writers, to the people who go to to a space like yours?
I think we're all missing being next to someone, even if we're not talking, but we're just doing the same thing. I know there's several writers in the city who get together at even a Tim Hortons or something. They couldn't even do that because the Tim Hortons were all closed too. But I think everybody felt the loss of just being physically near someone else who was going through the same creative joys and struggles as you are. And we've all had to kind of shift our writing process and our creative process accordingly to whatever our new life experience enables us to do.
What does that mean to your business economically?
It means there's very little economically going on, but gratefully, rent. I haven't had to pay rent, so that's really great. Good. A huge relief. And the one-to-one sessions that I'm doing, they're all virtual, and that I feel like can be a little bit more intimate. You know, I can make jokes about how I look, or I can pretend I'm reaching out. Like I can, you can kind of mimic those things, and it's still, you can make great eye contact, and you hear the pauses. And there's a little bit more intimacy, I think, with one-to-one. So there is some income coming in that way. But my work life otherwise as an editor has just gone crazy since this. So people have been writing more, and my role as an editor has been super challenged over the summer. So I've had some huge editing jobs, and those have brought in some nice money. So that's been very helpful. Yeah.
And what about writing yourself?
Yes, writing myself too. That's also been different because time has opened way up. And so whereas before I'm like, how am I going to fit it in? The discipline was different. Now it's like, ooh, I've got a lot more time. How do I fit it in when there's more time? So
what have you been doing? Writing?
Yeah. So I have a new collection of poetry that right now is in layout in design at Palimpsest Press. So that is on track to release in the spring, which is called? April or May. It's called Thimbles, as in sewing thimbles.
Yes.
Yep. And it's a collection about my grandmother who recently passed away, and her immigrant story from Italy and her legacy, and just the beautiful light that she was. And, about loss, family, love. It's very heavy.
Looks like you'll be coming back.
Yeah, we'll be crying. We'll need Kleenex for that for sure. Yeah.
So what about all of the artists, the writers who have been able to take part in some really wonderful types of events like at Willisstead? Everything's been closed down.
So there's so many amazing things happening online. The interwebs are spectacular. There are so many, anything you can imagine that you want to learn about writing is available in some shape or form online as a workshop or a class. Many of them are free. This is another thing that could be a challenge for an entrepreneur. There's so many great offerings that are free that, I don't know, it might feel weird for you to say, I'm doing a similar thing, but you have to pay. So that's a whole nother conversation. But there's just so many wonderful things happening. The Writers Union, they're doing podcasts, and those are free for members. And they are timely. They're about how to do a virtual class. If you want to talk about your genre to a high school class, you have to know how to be on the platform. No Zoom, no Google Meets, whatever the case is, whatever thing they're choosing.
What do you think will happen when we do go back to the best normal that we can anticipate? Will people go back to wanting to be able to go to, all those really wonderful writers events that we used to be able to go to?
I certainly hope so. I wonder if there may be some hybrid things in the transition as we move towards it, but I think so. I think at heart, people really do enjoy gathering together physically, clapping and hearing people clapping, hearing sighs, hearing the snaps. I think that it will go back to that. I mean, the publishing industry is changing, got hit really hard. It certainly feels very different for someone who creates this physical, tangible thing to not be able to share it physically and tangibly with other folks. So I think it'll go back to that, but I don't know if it will be exactly the same as it was before. I don't think anything will.
So now when you go back to Gertrude's, ever think of adding a cafe?
I thought about that. The original name and title, like the business dream, was Gertrude's Literary Cafe, with, Parisian snacks and coffee and fancy machines. It's possible.
Never know.
Yeah, it's very possible. We'll see.
Okay, so I think I did ask you this before. Windsor has a poet laureate, and could we see Vanessa Shields?
Whenever that posting comes up, I will absolutely be applying for it the next round for sure.
Oh, good, because
I think it's another year and a half, maybe, that Marianne Mulhern is our current poet laureate. So, yeah, for sure. I that is in the back of my mind as something that I'd be really interested in doing. Yeah.
Well, good luck with it all, and I'm sure we'll see you back here on Scribes and Songsters before long.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, that's all for this episode of Scribes and Songsters. Time sure flies. Please join us next time when you'll get to meet the music duo Fresh Breath, and you've been hearing them on the show, and you'll hear their latest song, It's Christmas Time Again. It's coming soon. Many thanks to our producers, Liz Pettipiece Phillips, Gary Glass, and Brian Sweet. Grateful thanks to Tony Toldo and the Toldo Foundation. Thank you for watching. Hope to see you soon right back here on Scribes and Songsters. I'm Veronique Mandel. Bye for now.